Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 200 of Weighing In. I'm David Mirikitani with Mark Ostrander and Grant Turner. We're made possible by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Before I say hi to the boys, I think on behalf of all of us, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watched, listened, shared, privately messaged any of us for supporting for 200 episodes. We're not going to act like we're too cool to talk about it for a quick second. It's fun to have been on this long and have had a voice. Really appreciate USA Wrestling having us on. So thank you for that. Mark, how was the weekend?
Good. Got to watch quite a bit of wrestling this weekend with U23s and the Pan American Games. A lot of stuff going on in wrestling right now, so I'm looking forward to getting into it.
GT, I know you were doing Nike USA Wrestling under 23 things and then doing Wedding, which looked like a Grand View inter-squad meet on your social media. But it's cool. One of your first guys, a national or an All-American, a part of one of your first national championship teams, right?
Yeah, so congratulations to Ty and Cass. Ty was on the first ever Grandview team, and by the time he left his collegiate experience, he was a All-American and had won a team national title. So, yeah, we got everybody back from some of the original squads. I think we had like 30 some odd guys from the previous teams all there supporting Ty. So, huge shout out to those guys and amazing wedding.
Yeah, and you guys did it right. You came to Missouri, so respect on that.
Destination wedding. I don't know, like Ozarks could be considered its own thing.
If you've seen that Netflix show, there's things going on there. So,
oh, for sure.
You went a good weekend. Memorial Day weekend at the Ozarks is always a blast. So, but I saw a couple of them guys, BB and Q, a couple of guys that I've crossed paths with. So shout out to all those guys. Anyway, Rob Cole, Stanford, Cornell, Mike Gray. I was texting, DMing, calling both of you guys and several other people. Grant, you were there. You and me were texting a lot. I'll let you go first. I guess obviously we know what's happened. Anybody who's not been under a rock, Rob Cole's a new coach at Stanford. Mike Gray got instantly announced as new coach at Cornell. What are you thinking?
Well, I got a chance to talk to Rob briefly, but he was, he was the moving and a shaking at the tournament. So like, I didn't get a chance to talk to him very much, just said, hello and a few things, but the buzz around the entire tournament was that Rob was going to be the next head coach at Stanford University. And, kind of the consensus from a lot of people, I mean, everyone's super competitive, but like, they all were like, that's a pretty awesome move. For Rob and for wrestling in general, for the collegiate stuff. So super exciting, I think it's an amazing hire for the West Coast. That guy is definitely a CEO of a program, knows how to do everything right, knows how to bring in the right kids, not right talent, knows how to build a program up. And, that's probably what they really need is a CEO at that location. So super excited for Rob. That's going to be a great situation for him, I think.
What about Mike Gray to Cornell before I get Mark's thoughts?
Mike Gray is the man. Just absolutely think that he's going to do a great job there. He knows everything. All the kids are still there. He was an associate head coach previously, so he was already kind of in that role. I think Mike's a great hire, keeping him within the family. He keeps a lot of continuity within Cornell University and a lot of the alumni boosters, like everybody on the team still that would then be coming back. I think he's the proper guy to navigate the Ivy League for those guys. Super excited. And I think that's also one of the best. That's a great hire for Cornell.
Marco.
I agree with pretty much everything Grant said. I think Rob Cole's going to do an outstanding job at Stanford. He's proven it at what he was able to do at Cornell. I've heard him speak. He's been interviewed a couple times. He's got a plan for him. He will follow that plan. That's just the way he is. That's how he built Cornell. It won't happen overnight. I think he anticipates almost all the guys coming back, which is a huge relief I don't know if he would have taken the job if the guys weren't going to come back. So I think he kind of knew some things going in. Being really good friends with the AD at Stanford was a big selling point for him because they contacted him. He wasn't. I'm sure he thought about it when he heard that they were coming back. I'm sure they called him right away and said, "Hey, we're interested in you." And I think the wheels just kind of started going. Great at Cornell. He'll do fine. I guess what I really liked about Rob is that he's not taking any of the Cornell guys with him. He's first class. He built that program at Cornell. He doesn't want to disrupt what he's done there. He wants them to do well, but he thinks at Stanford he can do the same thing, but maybe take the next step into winning a national title. And I'm not going to put it past him.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of those things except one minor thing, which I'll get to. So one of the nice things about doing this podcast for USA Wrestling is we can mention when other sources have covered something in a good way. When we were at track, you don't say, "Hey, the open mat did a good job, intermat did a good job, Flo did a good job." Willie Saylor did a great job on Rockfin, did like a 31-minute basically TED talk and walked through all this. So shout out to Willie. The guy never answers his phone, but always answers an email, but is, one of the hardest working men in wrestling. Got to give him a shout out. He loves the sport. He broke down a couple things that were kind of well-known secrets if you've coached. The number one thing is this, that Cornell had a loophole to get kids in that couldn't get in normally academically into an Ivy League school. They would send them to a junior college for a year, and then it was essentially a gray shirt. Their clock started in that they went full time, but it was basically like a red shirt not a gray shirt, because it was like their freshman year. They get their math, science, English, history, and then they get in. I talked to another Ivy League school coach who said that this was all based on a guy that had come through that junior college program, went to Cornell and was a significant donor and would only donate the money to Cornell if they let this happen. And, Cornell's they're a business. It's a good business decision. They did it. So that's the number one thing. The number two thing is that financial aid at an Ivy League school is all need-based, and it's the same for all the schools. Like there's an Ivy League calculator, and I've actually gotten that for a couple kids we've helped send out of high school where I'm one of the club coaches. So when they do that, Cornell just had what they were probably better at than anybody else was helping these parents way in advance. Maybe just having, if the parents are divorced, having the lower income parent claim them, moving assets around, things like that. So, but one of the things that you have to think about when you're the coach of Cornell is you're not dealing with 9.9 scholarships, which is theoretically bad, but it's also good in that you have unlimited aid. The rumor was if you could get a kid's family under $60,000, they'd pay $8,000 a year to go to Cornell. So there's a school, a really good school, that if you're a Pell Grant kid, you get literally 68% of school paid for. It's not in the Ivy League, it's another school. And that's why this school's so good at recruiting. They recruit kids that are poor on paper, and they can give them 25%. They take out a small loan and they're going for basically nothing. So Stanford, I talked to another Pac-12 coach. They have 4.5 scholarships right now. So my first question was, how in the hell do they have the kids they got on that team at 4.5 scholarships, right? Because you got to figure like a Woods and a Griffith and an Abbas were pretty close to fulls coming out. Well, it's because they have aid very similar to the other school I told you about, institutional aid, where everybody gets something to go there, unless you're Lori Laughlin's daughter or Bill Gates' son or daughter. So, GT, thank you for getting that. Okay, so now because you have scholarships, you have to deal with APR, which is the academic progression rate, which means if kids quit now, it could actually theoretically cut in your scholarships, or in one case, like with Buffalo several years ago, they were literally out of NCAA competition for a year. So the one part, Mark, where I'll slightly disagree with you is I'd be shocked if at least one kid from Cornell doesn't go to Stanford. I think that's probably going to happen. I think some of those guys, I mean, I talked to somebody who's inside the program. I think there's a chance that that will happen. I think, Grant, what you said, and I'm just going to expound upon it. I think Stanford not getting dropped from the Pac-12 and that conference not now, dropping below a critical mass number is gigantic. Okay. The other thing that I'd heard about Stanford big picture was that they cut these 11 sports, and they did it because of that part and parcel because of what happened with that admissions scandal with the Lori Loughlin thing, where these people were kind of sneaking in. The other thing was that kids were getting in that weren't necessarily 34 ACT, 1500 SAT, 4.1 GPA kids. And they thought if they opened those slots up, they could get those kids who in turn become more successful financially and become bigger donors. So what Stanford really did was just got these programs to pay for themselves. So now they're actually getting the money up front instead of waiting for the annuity. And I'm a business guy, so I always look at this stuff. Whenever anybody says it's not about the money, it's always about the freaking money. So Stanford played it really smart. Couldn't agree with you guys more that Rob Cole's a CEO. He's a program builder. He knows what he's doing. Here's the other piece. Rob Cole is like best friends with Andy Noel, the Cornell athletic director, and he's retiring at the end of this coming year. And there is a massive push to close that junior college loophole, both within Cornell because the other teams aren't getting to use it, and within the Ivy League because the other schools aren't getting to use it. And if they close that loophole, Mike Gray could be the second coming of Dan Gable and Cale Sanderson. It's going to be hard when there's a certain slice of the pie that you can no longer get in. So, I mean, Mike Gray is going to probably have a harder job in some sense than Rob Cole did. He's not starting from nothing like where Rob Cole was. Intermath did an awesome article on the before and after numbers of Rob Cole, but it is going to be tougher if they close the slice of the pie, like say the David Mirikitanis, the Mark Ostrainers, the Grant Turners, the world wanted to go there. We were willing to do our year in JUCO, and now we can't get in. So, and I was told Stanford doesn't have any sort of loophole or backdoor like that, which makes sense because you probably would have seen it happening there. I mean, but the person I feel the worst for in this whole thing is Jason Borelli. Like, I don't think he would have left if they know, no, we're going to give you $6 million and you can, we're going to support you. GT, you were out there. There's a bunch of rumors going out there. Have you heard anything about who the staff is going to be at either one of these schools? Because the staff got gutted pretty hard at Cornell. And then Coach told me Ray Blake said he's moving on to the private sector. I don't know about Terrapelli, but what are you hearing about staffing at either one of the schools?
I mean, mostly just conjecture and rumor at this point. I mean, I've heard, and I also watched another interview through another media outlet that basically kind of said, he's on it. I mean, also all the college coaches are able to do home visits now. It was June 1st, a couple of days ago. They're out recruiting. So that for Rob, it's going to be recruiting his staff and athletes all at the same time. So, as far as guys, I don't know officially who he may go after, but I'm sure he's going to get somebody for both kind of that in-room compete against type guy. He's probably going to get somebody that's been a head coach or wants to be like an associate head coach underneath him. It'd be very interesting to see what candidates pop up. And then starts the coaching carousel where, maybe a program loses one of their head assistants to this program, and then we start seeing some guys flip-flop. So, I mean, nothing officially that I could, stand behind and say, hey, I've definitely heard this. But some big names for sure in the rumor mill. Yeah.
Marco, have you heard anything? Because I got a couple names I've heard. So have you heard?
I haven't heard anything, but I do want to comment about one thing. You were talking about the Ivy League, being able to go to a junior college at Cornell for a year and then getting in. I think people have to understand something. He found something that worked to get some kids in that would not have been able to get in on their own previously. But let's look at really what's happened. They get into Cornell, and these kids are graduating from Cornell, David. They're not finding, you go to Cornell, you can't find easy classes. I mean, you go to junior college, you can find some remedial classes to keep kids in school, try to get them up to a level where they can take college level classes. You can't do that once you get into Cornell. You're taking top level classes, and these kids are able to do it and graduate that have went there. I'd hate to see them give that up when these kids are actually getting a great education and they are doing the work to get that education. I'd hate to see them lose that. I really would.
Yeah, I don't know their graduation rates. I mean, I'll assume they're all graduating, but the part of the loophole wasn't just going to junior college, that there are 8 colleges within Cornell, and there was one specific college that they all applied to and all got in, and all their transcripts were basically the same. So, I mean, look, everybody has advantages and disadvantages of where they coach. Okay. Like you talk to Grant Turner at Grandview, like, hey, we turned a bowling alley into a wrestling room. He chooses to look at that optimistically. Somebody else might say, why didn't you just build us a wrestling room? Right. We won a gazillion national titles, help us. So a lot of it is perspective, but also a lot of it is finding where your niche is. Like when we were at Merrimack, we had hardly any money. So the 2 things we had to do were 3 things: fundraise, out hustle everybody, and say, look, if you actually want to live in a city as opposed to a small town, this is where we're different than Chanute, Kansas, or, other cities, just things like that. So the rumors that were out there, well, a couple of them, that Damian Hahn that Rob Cole's looking to hire a coach in waiting, like what he had with Mike Gray, and Damian Hahn has put his name in for that. I'm guessing probably Troy Nickerson would probably put his name in for something like that. And then some of the crazy ones were that, first of all, it was that Kyle Dake was going to get the Cornell head coaching job, which seemed a little, Mark and GT, we both talked about that off the air. Like, how do you do that and compete? That's just too many plates in the air. And he actually could probably make just as much money as an RTC athlete if they figured it out right. And this is his first world team at an Olympic weight, like probably not the time to walk away. Then there was rumors that Dake was going to end up going to State College. He put out on Twitter he's not going west, but that doesn't mean he's not going to Penn State. And then the other rumor was that Nolf might end up out at Stanford. So I think if people know Rob Cole, he's going to hire a guy like a Mike Gray type who he sees as the next coach. Could be a Damian Hahn, probably going to be somebody he's super comfortable with. Doesn't necessarily mean that guy was a Cornell graduate. I mean, obviously Rob's network is super deep. He's probably got almost as many names and numbers in his phone as Grant Turner does, but pretty strong. So that'll be interesting to follow. And again, if like a Damian Hahn goes, in GT, you mentioned it, the coaching carousel then keeps spinning, so those are a lot of things to talk about. Those are a lot of things to look forward to talking about as the next couple of weeks, because it's all got to happen soon. And I guess, tied to that, we can go to this next. That tied to that is the transfer portal, because now if you say, hey, I went to school at Cornell because of Rob Cole, or I went to Stanford because of Jason Borelli, now I can go into the portal. So a couple portal news: Austin Gomez goes to Wisconsin. Nathan Traxler goes from Stanford to Virginia Tech. And sources I talked to said he'll go back down to 97, which is becoming by the week a better and better weight class, So, and then I talked to somebody who told me that they had heard that Max Dean is actually going to go 84 at Penn State and Aaron Brooks would go 97. I'm not sure I believe that. Neither one of them are really tall. I mean, Max Dean is taller than Brooks, but they're both, GT, you and I talked about that. They're both pretty short for 97. You were a guy that wrestled upper weights. I mean, length and distance are important at those weight classes, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, they both could absolutely wrestle 197. They would just be a little bit undersized. Doesn't mean that they would not win. There's tons of examples of guys that were shorter in height that have won 197. It's a head scratcher. Well, it's great for Penn State. They got a ton of dudes. They got to figure out where they're all going to go. So,
yeah.
you know,
First world
thinking,
problem.
yeah, it's a great, yeah, exactly. It's a great problem to have. So it's like, oh, well, I have 3 guys that could win a national title. I need 2 of them at these weights, and I got 1 of them at this weight. So, yeah, I think Penn State will have a very awesome problem there between all those guys.
Yeah, and Beard's still there too, obviously, who was an AA at 97 this year. So, I mean, for people that don't remember, Beard AA'd, Brooks won it, and Max Dean was a All-American, a runner-up at 84. We actually needed Drew Foster to win that match for us to win our pool that year, Mark Ostrander, and that happened. So yeah, that's going on. Pan Am results, America pretty much crushed everybody. I think Taylor Miller put out a result that said they had more gold medals than points they gave up in men's freestyle. We talked off the air that obviously the Pan Ams were down in depth, but the big part of that was Cuba didn't show up. And I don't think they anticipated Cuba not showing up. So, but congratulations. Like I talked to Nate Jackson the other day, he's a Pan Am champion now. And I think, especially for like the Nate Jacksons, the Shelton Max, even like a Vito Arujau, Joey McKenna, and I'm just Alec Pantaleo on the men's freestyle side, like the guys that haven't necessarily been on a national team before. And Nate said Guatemala was awesome. Like they toured a volcano, they're out trading, like, all the stuff I remember doing when I made trips. Great experience for them. The women crushed. The Greco team did really well too. I think if people are looking at this as a measuring stick for the Olympics, they need to understand that the vast majority of the people they competed against have not actually qualified for the Olympics. So, it was definitely a step down versus what we're going to see in Tokyo, maybe 2 or 3 steps down. So we're obviously super optimistic for our teams, and we're on USA Wrestling, and Grant's making singlets for USA Wrestling and everything else, but also keep a sense of realism and looking at those results. Now, the next thing, which I think we see a ton of stars in, were U23s. So, Mark, you watched a bunch of the U23s. Who or what stuck out to you?
I just think the competition was really really good. And I'm not talking about anyone in particular, but I just thought overall the competition was really, really solid. You saw some young kids coming up, and I'm kind of big into watching these young kids come up. We had a kid from Indiana at 61. Is it Mendez?
Yeah, he's already made one world team, and now he might not get to go on that team because he got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, he was in the finals, of U23s, and he's a junior. He just graduated, finished his junior year in high school. I mean, to know that those kids are out there is so exciting, and to see where he ends up going is exciting because everybody's kind of sitting on the edge of their seats waiting to see where he's going to commit to. But it's just fun to watch that happen. So I was really impressed with the competition there. I didn't think it was going to be as good as it actually was. I think once you started watching the wrestling, it really amazed me. So
before I get to you, GT, U23s used to be called Akron. Okay, so for people that just like junior nationals and cadet nationals is just called Fargo, this was the old Akron. And, USA Wrestling has just had to scramble to find basically places that are not going to be COVID prohibitive to running wrestling events. So, Grant, I know you're there for like a day or two. You were my roving correspondent. You're telling me all your new journalistic integrity rules that you have now. So from the Nike booth, but you're around these all the time. So I feel like you're the best measuring stick of the 3 of us. You continue to be impressed, I would assume.
Well, I think to Mark's point, the level of competition was amazing. So I do think as far as numbers were concerned, I mean, it was really difficult because USA Wrestling had a tough time, basically finding a venue. And they went through, I think, 3 or 4 different locations in order to host this event due to the COVID restrictions and other things of that nature. I mean, I love age group category wrestling. I think the U15s, the UW juniors, the U23s, it's a developmental process. And I really want to see these U23 guys make that jump to the senior level. And I think it's a great age category for the college guys. or even younger. You know, some of those guys are in the U19 still that have come up to wrestle at that weight class or age division. I just think that it's a really, really good team. I mean, I think some of those guys, there's some big names. I mean, you look at that U23 team, and it's, you know, some of the who's of college wrestling. You know, Demas, Cassiope, Pat Glory, you know, Cannon,
Corey Teemer.
Yeah, Ja'Cory Teemer. Like there's guys that, like, if you watch NCAA wrestling this past season, you're going to have some names that you definitely have seen and know their careers. So, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what this team can do. There's some hammers on that team. So,
Hey, Grant,
Yeah.
one quick question, because you were there in person. Patrick Glory, is he as big as he looked on TV? Because he is built.
well,
When did he become built? I mean, I haven't seen him for a year and a half compete. This guy is chiseled.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because, like, you watch him on film and you watch him on television, and all of a sudden you're like, good Lord, he's ginormous. But you also got to remember he's a little guy. So, like, when you walk around him, you're like, oh my gosh, like, you're a little rocked up collegiate wrestler. I'm like, and I mean, all 57 kilo guys are usually pretty short, unless you have somebody like Boudryden who's like 6'4". So he's as big and he's as good as advertised. I think Pat Glory is, you know, he's going to make some noise, especially within the international scene, because I think his style transitions to the international game fairly well. And
Yeah.
being with the you know, the NJRTC guys, you know, they do a pretty good job of, you know, filtering their talent to wrestle on that international circuit and stage. So he's definitely having a good tournament here.
Yeah, the two guys that sort of stuck out to me were Teemer, and, you know, obviously I think most people know I have a good relationship with Arizona State and Lee Pritz. Teemer, to me, made a huge jump at the NCAAs and then this event, because in the past we saw him when he would run into a lot of adversity. Like, he was a great front runner, but if somebody kind of punched back, he didn't always punch back the second time. For him to lose at the Nationals and come back through and take third was amazing. And then for him, he was down like 7-0 to Mahler in match 2, like 20 seconds in, and came back and won 9-8. And I texted Pritz afterwards. I was like, that's more impressive to me than him winning 10-0, because you got to overcome that adversity. And the other guy that stuck out to me was Glory, because when Glory came out, he was not a freestyler. Like, it was like him and Gavin Teasdale, and like Teasdale was the freestyle guy because he like teched him at one of those Beat the Streets events. And Glory was a guy that's like, well, but he can take down and ride, and it's just a different style, but, you know, maybe he'll figure it out, but either way, he'll be a great college wrestler. Well, he is a great college wrestler, but he's also become you don't make a world team by accident, period. Doesn't happen. You know, and he's like you guys said, he's developed his body, but he's also developed his technique. And shout out to Chris Ayers, Joe Dubuque, Sean Gray, Reese Humphrey, all those guys, because they won. The NJRTC won the under 23 team title at the you know, at under 23s in Lincoln. So that's a big step. And then, as if that wasn't enough, how's this for professional segues, fellas? NJRTC is combining with the NYCRTC, which is the Kendall Cross University or Columbia University RTC. And on top of that, Jordan Oliver has decided he wants to get coached by every great Oklahoma State alumni that's ever wrestled. So he's now moved on to that RTC and committed to the next, I don't want to call it a quad, but through 24. So I'll go first here because I talked to Nate, and they got, I don't know if we talked, Jaden Cox is going to train out there for periods of time too. So huge. First of all, those guys must be raising money. Good for them, because those guys don't come free. But second of all, Princeton now, and they separated themselves from Rutgers. So all this stuff happened like this. Separated themselves from Rutgers, added Jaden, combined with the NYC, and now as a part of that, Jordan Oliver is going to be training with all those guys. I think it's smart because Princeton and Columbia are both Ivy League schools. They don't have the same kind of budgets that like a Penn State or University of Iowa has. There's strength in numbers. And now if you're a smart kid, that seems like an awesome place to go train. Mark, I'll let you go first. When you hear about all that, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's great for the RTC programs. I mean, they have I think there were at one time, what, 3 of them out there, David? Kind of within a 100-mile radius,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, now there's still 3, but you got the Spartan. You've got, Cornell. Rutgers has kind of went out on their own now, and now you got New York and Princeton working together. So you still have 3, but yeah, I think why not? Why not get good coaching? I mean, I think Oliver's doing the right thing. He's getting a little bit from everybody he's ever been around to try to get better, to try to, perform. So kudos to him. I think it's a great move for him.
What do you think, GT?
Yeah, I think that they're combining resources, and once again, as a collective, you got tons of those international guys that come and train at the New York RTC with people like Frank Chamizo, Vladimir Kanishvili, Valentin Kliga, he coaches up there. They got, I think it's Evan Henderson that's training at the New York RTC. Now he gets a chance to work with like Reese, and after talking to Reese on the phone lately, they're going to kind of split up practices. So like, they'll be down in New Jersey. I think it's like 2 days a week, and then go up to New York for 1 day a week or something like that, where they're going to basically move all coaches, all wrestlers, everybody to those locations, and then have like kind of a group format, multiple times throughout the week. So if you can't make it, it's only like an hour or so from location to location. So I think it's a great thing for the East Coast and everybody within that area to, get coached up by some of the best coaches in the world, really.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have both Reese and Kendall on the podcast. And Kendall is a sort of laid back, like we just had him. He's like, hey, if it's not working, just keep working. It'll gather things up. It'll come to you. And, Reese is like a player's coach, if it was like, they say that in football, like a guy that's, like the guy you want to go hang out with, Nate Jackson and those guys love him. He got coach of the USA Wrestling Coach of the Year, and he's doing breakdancing moves and everything else. I think, certainly a high energy guy, and guys buy into that. I mean, probably the second best coaching breakdancer to Mark Ostrander. So after he takes his nap. So, but yeah, it's huge news. And I think I'm a big believer in the good enough theory. That like once something's good enough, you go with it, whether it's like a product you buy or a service you pay for or whatever else. Like somebody pays for Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. It's good enough. I think those combining has made that RTC almost on any criteria you would think of good enough that now it's like, yeah, okay, if I can get into one of those schools, I'm going to go there. And it's almost like the car lot theory too, where like 5 dealerships all are on like car row. The person's more likely to go buy a car if they can test drive 5 of them right away. The person will apply to Columbia and Princeton and then figure it out, but because they can go to the RTC through either one of them. So it makes a lot of sense. It's like a lot of things. Once you get the back end of it, like none of us were thinking Rob Cole 2 weeks ago, and now it's like, well, that makes all the sense in the world. Hey, his best friend was leaving. He was not going to stay. He was ticked off that, the Ivy League canceled his season. He was ticked off that Cornell was trying to punish him for having practices off site, where every other school was just doing that without any hassle. So he wanted to leave. It wasn't that he didn't love his kids, but he's a grown man and doesn't need to be hassled for being a coach. Like, oh, well, if we know all that, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. So, Austin O'Connor is going up to 157. Mark, I will say this. You pointed this out to me first, and I want to say it the way you said it. All the weights are really good, but 157 is one of the shallowest weights, I think is a fair way to say it. Heidley's moving out. Del Vecchia is not coming back. David Carr would be ranked 1, but I think Austin O'Connor would go right in at number 2. And we talked about like if a Keegan O'Toole came down, he would be number 3. I think this is a really smart move because I think 49 is going to be a lot deeper next year with all the guys coming back, plus maybe a Yanni and maybe a Nick Lee. So, Mark, you kind of pointed this out to me. What are your thoughts about O'Connor going 57?
Yeah, I think it was a good move for him. I think he's big enough to wrestle 57. Obviously, Deacon's coming back to Northwestern. I just don't know what weight he's going to wrestle. I don't know if he's going to go up to 65 or stay at 57. You're going to have to put him in there because I'm not sure he's not the second best kid at that weight if he's performing well. Maybe the best kid at the weight if he's performing well because he's proven it. But yeah, I just think after you get through the first couple guys, it's kind of wide open. You could pick 10 guys that could be, fairly high All-Americans where you can't do that at a lot of the other weights. So, yeah, I think it makes their team a little stronger.
Yeah, and GT, like we know Tony Ramos has probably already knocked on 30 doors between June 1st and June 3rd at 11:40 a.m. I actually talked to Ramos about who was going where, and I actually talked to Jamil too. Like they had it all mapped out. Jamil was going here, and Coleman was going there. And I know Shane Griffith went in there this past weekend, so or at least was scheduled to. So, that's the other thing we didn't talk about with the Stanford thing. Like how that affects the team race, but. O'Connor to 57, you're a guy that's still coaching and probably works out with guys in those weight classes when you're not beating up on high school 113 pounders. What do you think about him going 157?
Yeah, I think Mark was 100% right. I think the weight class opens up a little bit. I mean, David Carr, of course, is returning champ coming back. Basically the other All-Americans at that weight, Caleb Young, Wyatt Sheet, Teamer, Wyatt Sheets also had one of the greatest tournaments, from not being able to qualify to, 8th place. That's pretty wild. So I think that weight class opens up pretty well. I mean, once again, we have 2 years worth of freshmen that are going to be available now. So once again, the high school kids are coming in ready to wrestle at the collegiate level. So there might be a couple of guys that we're not thinking of that might be, coming into college in the fall or that were redshirted all last year. That could be some hammers, but O'Connor at 57 makes some sense to me, especially if they can move some guys around at UNC to make room to maybe make a push to get some of those, maybe a team trophy. So yeah, if it works out better for them team wise, I think it'll be great.
Well, and we all know this. We all coach. The way to get recruits is to be wearing a suit on Saturday night, sitting in the finals, because that's where kids want to be. Like. You're actually better having 4 guys take first than 10 guys take third in terms of recruiting, because nobody goes to a school so they can take third, win a team trophy, and eat popcorn during the finals. They want to be in the finals. They want to do that. They want to be, and as a coach, you want to be wearing a suit. You want to be down there. You want to be a part of that. There's a special energy in the finals. Not all of us are as cool as Grant can do rock, paper, scissors during an injury timeout to keep their guys loose. That's some next level coaching there.
David, I'm just kind of wondering right now who Ohio State's going to have at 157 next year. I mean, I haven't heard what they're looking at doing, but they lost a 57-pounder, went into the portal. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out who are they going to slide in there? Is somebody going to come down from 165 or is somebody going to go up from 149?
Well, I mean, Karchla is going to be in that one of those two weights, right? And I mean, and we're all super high on him based on his freestyle prowess and how he did. I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about Ohio State's lineup. I think that's what you and I will do a lot of come September and October, is start breaking out rankings. It'll be the most challenging year of doing rankings ever because, I mean, we've talked about this, but very briefly, you delete everybody who's not coming back, and usually that's a third of the bracket. Well, this year it's probably going to be 3 guys.
And Lee from Minnesota was an All-American at 57. He'll be back. So
yeah, and he gave David Carr the best match of the tournament. He was actually tied with him with like 30 seconds left. I mean, he was on top, so he's tough. He had to ride out, and he's not a rider.
It's not that 57 doesn't have good kids. I just don't think they have as many really good kids as the weights that are right next to them, 49 and 65. That's why I think it's a good move to go up to 57.
57 doesn't have as many guys that have made the finals. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. There's, all Americans are not created equal. A guy that's a 4-timer is not the same as the guy that took 8th. It's just not the same. So, I mean, there's no easy weight classes ever, especially at that level. But I think deep and shallow is a fair way to explain it, without being overly complimentary or certainly critical. So, we got about 3-4 minutes left. So, next week, we're going to talk about the squad that the United States is sending to Poland, but it is deep and it is fun, and it is guys that we have not seen in a while, i.e. Soriano, i.e. Cox. And then guys that we have seen every week for the last year, i.e. Nate Jackson. So, there's that's going to be a super fun event. That event will give us a much better idea of where those guys are, because it'll be in Europe, obviously, and will be much more comparable to the Olympic level of competition than what the Pan Ams were. Two or three last things. Tadaka Hata and Grant, thank you again, was kind enough to send my father his own technique book and write something to my dad in Japanese, which if he's nice to me, he'll tell me what that actually said. So that was an awesome gift. It was an early Father's Day gift from me to him. And Grant, it was duly noted that you were a part of that process. So thank you. And then we are recording this on Thursday, but this will come out Friday. So it means when you see this yesterday, which is today, episode 100 of Matt Chat will come out, which was with my father, Ron Mirikitani. So Mark was kind enough to basically run that interview and let me play Robin to my dad's Batman, which I've been blessed to do for a lot of years as his assistant coach. But I just want to thank USA Wrestling for making a concerted effort to honor some of the folks of Asian American, Pacific Islander, and in our case, Hata's, my father's and mine, Japanese heritage. And Mark, you got some good information out of my dad. I was a little surprised about how forthcoming he was. He's not always super talkative about some of the hardships that he's gone through.
Yeah, it was a good. I really enjoyed visiting, but I've known your dad for years, David. I've known him, for probably, I don't know, I'm getting old, 40 years now. So, didn't know him real well until I was coaching, but even as an athlete, I knew him because he'd come up and talk to me, and your mom would come up and talk to me, even when I was an athlete. So, yeah, they're great people. He had a great story to tell. How he got to where he is, I think is fascinating, and I think the listeners are going to enjoy listening to it.
Yeah, this is a guy, for people that don't know, that never wrestled till college and is now the all-time winningest coach in junior college history. He's an 8th degree black belt in 4 different martial arts, and he's in, I think, 9 wrestling Hall of Fames and another 13 martial art Hall of Fame. So, and totally biased, but just a really good dude and a guy who's a great example. If I'm ever a screw up in my life, it's not because of my mother or father. It's because of a conscious choice I made to just.
Yep, you do all that on your own, David. Way to go. Good job.
Not follow a good example. It's okay if you say it about yourself. It's rude if someone piles on, Mark. Just etiquette terms for the future.
Okay.
All right, boys. Well, I'm headed to the Hall of Fame this weekend. Big shout out to all the inductees, and special shout out to my man, Gary Abbott, who has let us grace the airwaves here at USA Wrestling. I know we all have a ton of respect for Gary, and I'm going to be proud to be there, and hopefully he'll let me be one more person in the Hall of Fame I can take a picture with. So congrats to all those people going in. I know Zadok's going in, and Bruce Burnett and Tim Shields, and I know I'm forgetting some people, so I apologize. But congrats to all them. Thank you guys all so much for watching, listening, tweeting, sharing, sending DMs, all that stuff. And we'll speak to you all next week.